This episode of Liquid Assets is sponsored by HASA, the leader in water treatment solutions. HASA delivers eco-friendly, reliable, and cost-effective water care and has been keeping communities safe, one drop at a time. They've been at it for more than 60 years, and you can learn more about HASA by visiting hasa.com. That's HASA, HASA.com. Welcome to Liquid Assets. Liquid Assets is a podcast that talks about the intersection of policy, management, and technology, all as it looks at the world of water. Today, we have an amazing guest for you. We have Josh Dorfman. Josh, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm Josh Dorfman, CEO and host of Supercool, a B2B media company for real-world climate solutions that are cutting carbon, boosting profits, and improving modern life.
Yeah, thanks a ton for being on. Before we hit record, we were having a little conversation on kind of what you wanted to cover. And I think your story is just really, really cool around Supercool of what you're working on today, which is the company's name, Supercool. And then your company with Planted, I think that'd be really interesting. But let's actually rewind before that, which is what I didn't explore before we were talking. Walk us through what was the idea behind Planted, and maybe even take one step before that. What came up that gave you Planted? And obviously for the audience, you can explain what Planted is. I'm purposefully not explaining what the company does, but yeah, I'll give you the mic there.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, thank you for that. So quick background that gets to Planted. I've spent about 2 decades working at this intersection of sustainability, startups, crossed over into media on occasion, and have always had this point of view of that if you're going to build businesses around sustainable solutions, those solutions should be hopefully better than the status quo, should be able to compete on price, and should be so awesome that people would want them even if they didn't care about climate change or saving the planet. It just meets them where they are, fits their needs. And so that's been a through line for me. Right before Planted, I was running my second modern design sustainable furniture company. The first I had in New York about 2 decades ago, which was a showroom started in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, which I lived in for 4 years. So very committed to this type of thing. And the second one, it was called Simple Assembly. It was kind of IKEA style, direct to consumer, really beautiful furniture, trying to hit an accessible price point. And we were using this very high quality Forest Stewardship Council certified wood, in this case, a plywood. Right? So it comes from responsibly managed harvests, has this whole kind of chain of responsibility connected to it. And the pandemic hit. At first, that was great. We were selling desks, and as people were furnishing their homes and moving away from the office. And then it was terrible because our factory shut down, and like many others, we were stymied. When I could get this material, which was not very often at that point, the price was going through the roof and the quality was going down. And it really got me reflecting about material. And it got me reflecting about this idea of, okay, this wood is, comes from a responsibly managed forest, but is that really the best we can do in terms of materials in terms of saving the planet or creating truly sustainable solutions? I kept thinking about that. And in that moment, as I was kind of shut down and reflecting on materials, I was introduced to a guy who had moved so I was in North Carolina. He moved to North Carolina. I was living in Asheville up in the mountains. I'd been there for about 8 years. And WADA had moved to the Raleigh-Durham area. Someone we both knew put us in touch, said, hey, you should really talk to this guy. He's got a little manufacturing thing going like you. And I took a look at his website and I thought, I don't really need to talk to this guy. I'm very brand driven, aesthetically driven. And it was not that. And so I kind of dismissed it, but he's very persistent. So we get on the phone. Wada says to me, man, you're going to build this awesome company. It's sustainable. And I'm like, no, I don't really think so. And I tell him all my issues with material. And he's like, well, what would you do? And I'm like, well, I think maybe hemp. I don't know, something that has more renewable, grows faster, has a better story. He's like, oh, I've got 6 giant trash bags of hemp in my garage. And I was like, what? Who are you? Where'd you come from? What are you talking about? He's like, well, I just moved here. I just spent 8 years running the life support systems team for the Dragon crew spacecraft at SpaceX. And I'm like, and you just moved to Raleigh-Durham? And he's like, well, I left. I'm an engineer. I put a spreadsheet together of all the cities in America and my criteria. And Raleigh came to the top. We got here. There's a lot of trees. It's nice. So here we are. What was awesome was I was thinking about kind of renewable materials through my lens around sustainability. WADA, coming from SpaceX, was thinking about carbon removal because Elon was talking a lot about carbon removal. And so we kind of instantly latched on to this idea of, well, man, what if we could develop a supply chain for some biomass that actually could grow faster than trees? What if we could do that? And then we thought, well, if we could find something that grow much faster than trees, we could pull carbon in a faster cycle down from the atmosphere. And so then we thought, well, what if we could find something that could pull carbon faster that was also actually had utility, that was going to be durable, that we could actually maybe replace trees in? And where do trees go? Trees go into home building. Okay, well, what if we could get a SpaceX team here and build a factory to make some engineered product out of some material that's not trees? What would we even make? And so all of that was like 30 minutes. And I was like, dude, here's what we should do. I'm going to shut my company. I think you should shut yours. We should go do this. 2 weeks later, Wada's in Nashville. We go for a walk and we're like, yeah, we're going to do this. Let's go talk to home builders, figure out what they might need. And so Planted is actually that. What we eventually latched onto was a very fast growing grass, that's rapidly, of course, rapidly renewable. It kind of looks like bamboo, grows like bamboo, thinner than bamboo, so we can mechanically harvest it. And we got to work building verticalizing a supply chain around ag to grow grass, from culture lab to greenhouse to giving plants to farmers in North Carolina and Virginia. We brought more SpaceXers to North Carolina, and we built the world's first electric modular production capability for essentially making plywood, or what's now oriented strand board, which is what you nail to the 2x4s in a house to get your walls, your roofs, your subfloor. But we make it out of grass instead of trees, and it's an electric factory. So we pull carbon down, but we don't give it back up a smokestack, and we get to carbon negative building materials. We're now working with the largest home builder in the country, D.R. Horton, who in the fall of 2024 purchased or placed an order for 10 million panels. That's about 90,000 homes, a proverbial rocket ship of a company.
I want to actually click into the 90,000 homes at DR Horton, and I have some questions actually around the material itself. But before we get there, I want to actually touch on your furniture side of this place in Greenpoint. Two questions actually come to mind. The first is, you had said initially when you were talking to your co-founder, what was his name again? I didn't catch it.
Wada, like water. He's from originally from China. Wada.
Wada. And you had seen his website and you were kind of like, hey, this is not, it's not sexy. There's no brand here. What is your idea of brand? Like I kind of want to flip that question around of like, what does brand mean to you? What does design mean to you? And obviously you had this kind of premium furniture company. And I think that ties to how and why products can be delightful as well. And so I just want to pick on that for just a quick second. What does that mean to you?
My sensibility around design is always been kind of contemporary, future forward looking, very interested in the visual aesthetic. And I think because for me, around thinking about sustainability, maybe growing up and whenever the age that I grew up, but with these preconceptions of sustainability basically being like a burlap sack, some twigs, you tie some string around, you sit on at a campfire, right? Just like this sort of stereotype of what eco-friendly used to be. Because when I started my first modern design furniture company, eco-friendly company 2 decades ago, that's what it was, right? That's what else was out there. And so for me, it's always been very important to lean into think about like a Tesla, right? When that first came to market, that versus a Prius, right? Just like this, what that signifies to someone when it's like, wow, like the most beautiful thing could also be the most sustainable thing. That's always an ideal that I have in my head.
That's really cool. And the second question that came up, and since I have you here, I'm sure a lot of the audience has this question. If we're going out and buying furniture, you had mentioned the FSC, the Forest Steward Council. What should we look for? Like, should I be shopping at IKEA? I just think it's a very normal question, right? Like we're moving out of our apartment in New York. If I'm going to go buy new furniture, should I go on Facebook Marketplace? Is it better to kind of get embedded, stuff that's already been made? I saw this interesting Instagram video where they were kind of like, people love older furniture made in the late 1800s, early 1900s, because the wood that we're growing today grows very quickly, and therefore it's less dense, and the products kind of break down quicker. And so we kind of want this more reliable, robust wood. I don't know if that's true or not, but if I'm going to go buy furniture, should I not buy something? Should I buy something? Where should I look at?
Okay, so first of all, that is true. The wood from the yeah the and that's because we cut down basically all the trees. I mean, almost all the old growth is essentially gone. So anything that's grown, at least in America, is a relatively new tree, and new trees will not be as dense as trees that were around for hundreds and hundreds of years. The way that I would think about it is secondhand used is awesome. It's really probably one of the best things to do. So I do think FSC certified wood. I don't mean to fully just kind of step on it and diminish it. It is a better alternative than not FSC, than wood that you don't know what the origin is or where it's come from. So I think though for consumers, IKEA actually is a pretty responsible company. It's actually really fascinating how responsible they are given their size and the price point they hit. It's a tricky thing. And I think that consumers, you can do a lot of looking around and try and find, something like we might have had, like Simply, but that's going to take a lot of legwork. But I think, if you look at IKEA, if you look at West Elm, if you look at Pottery Barn today, you will see across some of these more mainstream companies that they do have either product lines or specific pieces that are more responsibly made. And I think that is more prevalent too. So I think you can shop from more responsible companies. I think within those companies, you can shop from more responsible lines. You could do a quick search for cool startups. That stuff might be all over the map in terms of price. But secondhand is awesome. And that's really becoming so much more viable. There's marketplaces, there's infrastructure on the back end, right? That's actually collecting secondhand and making these. It's not just Facebook Marketplace. It's making a more delightful shopping experience, easier to access, better delivery. It's all evolving. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's fast forward back to DR Horton. 90,000 homes. A question that kind of popped up, and we had Ruben Volmer from this company Spout on the pod, and he actually lives in Topanga Canyon when the Los Angeles fires were happening. And what's kind of coming to mind, and this has been a topic of conversation in a few of the pods, is around, I guess the larger question here is like structural capability as well as robustness of the planted product. And then I guess secondarily with kind of more climate related events happening with these fires in California. Any kind of comments on that? Can you kind of talk to what that looks like? Definitely from like the carbon standpoint makes a lot of sense. But if you just compare this to plywood, how does that kind of compare?
Yeah. So on the structural side, let's talk about on the how we conceive this. What's very exciting about the technology that we've built, and it's so the technology that we've built is designed for the biomass that we farm. By that I mean, we've chosen this, hardy grass that we discovered through the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. It's a great partner for us. We can grow it, harvest it, and then mechanically slice it extremely thin while still retaining the structural integrity of the fiber. If you think about, I mentioned plywood, plywood is these different layers of veneer that are layered on top of each other and glued. So imagine you might have 3 layers, you might have 6, you might have 12. You're not going to build a house with something with 12 layers. You're going to build something right with fewer because it's going to be cheaper. We can, when the way that we're able to actually slice our product and then, adhere it together, there's just many more layers of fiber. So we get to a much stronger product. If you think about a plywood, right, or you think about oriented strand board that's essentially replacing plywood in home building because it's also cheaper, it's oriented. Both are oriented in a direction. And that oriented direction is the strength direction. If you were to actually press on it in the other direction, it's not that strong. Our product is random orientation. It's actually stronger in all directions. And it comes back to the fiber that the biomass we've chosen and the way we're actually able to work with it. And so there's a structural integrity there that is awesome. With that said, what we've intentionally done in product development is made a board, right? That again, structural, you build a house with it, that has effectively the same density. We want to make it stronger, but we want to do it in a way where when you're on a job site and you're driving a nail through that board with a nail gun or a screw, you don't even know the difference. It's the same exact experience, right? So drop-in replacement. That's also creates some design parameters that we have to build our product with it, right? Because really for someone like D.R. Horton or for any builder, if we're trying to get to scale, we can't ask anybody to build any differently than they do today, right? We want to slot right into their systems. And that's really how we create the most impact possible. So that's how we think about kind of the product impact. We've been working with D.R. Horton almost since we raised our seed round in 2021, and so they've been in our shop. They've seen the development process, and a lot of that confidence comes both from having a SpaceX-led team, right? That inherently gives a lot of confidence, but also, when they first showed up at our prototype shop in this is probably early 2022, so 3 years ago now. We're in Durham, in North Carolina, in this really, really like I don't know how else to say that, just like utterly crappy, dirt cheap prototype shop because SpaceXers are also dirt cheap, which is awesome. But they're coming in, they're like, oh, okay, SpaceXers, and we've got their supply chain team, we've got some executives there, we've got the investment team, and what do they see? Well, we're at a stage where we can make probably like a prototype that's a little bit bigger than a sheet of paper. And the mixer, right? Because you got to slice this grass, put a little resin on it. So to mix it, Wada had gone out and purchased was a 50-gallon used pickle barrel, right? This black barrel, and a used treadmill that he bought for about $120 off of Craigslist. Takes the pickle barrel, bolts it to the treadmill, runs it on fat burn, throws the grass in a little bit of resin, and that's our mixer, right? Now, if you were going to buy one at that size, it's probably $3,000 or $4,000, right? If you're right, but so at first the dissonance of these high level execs coming in, okay, it's SpaceX, and they're like, what is this dingy little spot? And then they see this thing, right? And they're like, kind of like trying to compute all of this, but then the light bulbs go off, and they're like, their eyes light up. They're like, oh my gosh, like the ingenuity, the sense of like these people will be incredible stewards of our cash if we work with these guys, right? All of that just starts to have massive, massive resonance. And that's really important for how we build our technology and how we inspire trust, both in the company, in the technology, and ultimately in the product that home builders are going to use.
That's such an awesome story, Josh. That's really I'm like envisioning this pickle barrel on this treadmill that's just running like a concrete mixer, and you're just throwing stuff inside. That's super cool. No pun intended. Let's actually move over to super cool. You're currently not at Planted anymore. I think you'd mentioned you're exiting the company. You're like on the advisory board. Walk us through that transition, and then what's up at Supercool. What is Supercool? What are you working on? Let's kind of fast forward to today.
Sure. Yeah. So I co-founded the company with two guys from SpaceX, Wada and Nathan. Nathan is the current CEO. Wada's effectively CEO. They run the company together. So we worked together for 3 years and got through seed, got through Series A, established this relationship with D.R. Horton, with some other important companies and customers for the company. And then, after we got through that time, and there was still a moment where, it was the engineering and the operations to continue to get to market was going to last for a while. My skill sets are really best around commercialization, but it was kind of a moment where we thought, you know what, we're going to be in this place for a while. Like this company, even at this stage, may require some different leadership, and so we started to affect kind of a transition. So I rolled off as CEO, stayed on as an advisor, brand ambassador for the company, out there telling the story, and still, very close and connected to those guys, and have just been, they're the two greatest geniuses I've ever met. So, it's I feel I feel pleased, thrilled that I've been part of it, and just very excited for the future of that company. When I left, as someone who's been working on sustainability driven ventures for my whole career, I kind of lifted my head up. I'd spent 3 years looking at materials, looking at construction, looking at these different industries. And I started saying, okay, well, what else is happening around climate innovation? And what I saw really kind of coalesced around 3 trends, I would say. The first is, if you look back over the last decade or so around climate tech, you see that there are close to 2,000 startups that raise Series B funding or beyond. So what does that say? That says we're actually in a new moment. Now, not all of those have succeeded. Of course, a bunch have flamed out, but that means there's loads of them that had went from lab through pilots to commercial scale, and now are actually going up, scaling up market. Right. So there are solutions out there that are working for cutting carbon that are viable. And then you see, like in 2024, globally, $2 trillion was invested in clean energy technologies. First time you reached $2 trillion. That was $1 trillion more that was invested in fossil fuels last year. Right. So even if you consider that the U.S. has some headwinds today around clean energy, the Trump administration has a different view than the Biden administration, so be it. Out of that $2 trillion number, as historic as everything that happened under the Biden administration for clean energy, the US was only 16% of that number, roughly 330 billion. Right? The rest is global. So this is inevitable that we are transitioning toward a cleaner future, just with unprecedented capital. And then the third is, if you scan the globe, there are over 13,000 cities that have climate action plans that have turned themselves effectively into living laboratories for policy change, prototyping different solutions. You put that all together, and I feel like we're in a new era when it comes to climate, the climate economy, how we're moving toward a low carbon future. And all of this innovation is underway, but underreported. So we felt that there was an opportunity to build a media brand that latches on to that innovation, latches on to those solutions, and starts to tell those stories across platforms in a way where decision makers who aren't necessarily sustainability folks can now say, I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that there's all these customers who are using it in other companies. It's de-risked. Maybe I could take this thing to my boss and not risk losing my job because it's actually already working in the market and it's actually helping companies cut costs, cut carbon, and improve their businesses.
Amazing. And so, who is the target audience for the media property? And I guess even before you answer that question, what does the company look like? You said kind of 2,000 startups. Do you cover these startups? Is there a podcast? Is there just the blog? Like what does the product look like?
Today, the product is a weekly podcast, a weekly newsletter, YouTube channel. We're moving what we hope is quickly by the fall into events where we bring an offline component to this. And we go out and we cover innovation, I would say, at 3 levels. We talk to a number of growth stage startups, climate tech startups. We talk to executives at some of the largest companies in the world. We recently had a board member from Siemens Energy on the show. So we recently had a board member from Siemens Energy on the show, Tim Holt, who covers their grid technologies business. And we talk to mayors. And the reason why we talk to mayors is for what I laid. Mayors are like these institutional entrepreneurs, the best of them, who are working very quickly to roll out and implement climate action. So we want to understand from a policy perspective, from a kind of scale up growth stage startup perspective, and then from the leading companies in the world focused on the clean energy transition, what's underway. We're digging in to understand what are the solutions, what works, kind of run that across our platform, and we case study these things. And so that, again, if someone's listening to the show or subscribing to the newsletter, they can say, okay, I get this. This is real. Here's why this thing works. Here's the superpower that enabled this company maybe to sell into schools or do something that's really hard to do. It's like a company like Zoom that electrified Oakland's school buses. And we really try and distill the innovation and understand, even if you aren't in that industry, what are the lessons to draw from that other industries and other business leaders can learn from too.
Awesome. And in covering these growth stage startups, working with these large execs, and then kind of speaking to these mayors, who is digesting this information today? You kind of gave this example of, you have like a VP or a CTO or some engineer that's like, oh, hey, this technology may have flamed out, but hey, look, it actually went through the ringer and it works fine. So I'm not going to lose my job. Let me present this as something we can do at Siemens. Is that kind of the major use case? Who's
Yeah. So I think a lot of the feedback we get are people working in the built environment. Of course, we're covering buildings a lot. Buildings are 40% of our global emissions or urban infrastructure. So we did a show with a company called BrainBox AI and their CEO, Sam Ramadori. BrainBox AI it's an AI solution. It's a cloud solution that with very minimal hardware, they can go into a building and take over the HVAC system. So in most buildings, HVAC, right, heating, cooling, ventilation, is about half the energy that buildings consume. It's massive. And so their solution is able to, they pull in all these different variables using like this big LLM, this big brain. And they say, okay, we know in 6 hours, with 96% certainty, who's going to be on this floor. Right? Who's going to be occupying this building space? So we can gradually either raise the temperature or lower the temperature to get to the comfort point for when they're there. And because we can do that over 6 hours, we can use more energy when the energy on the grid's cheaper, right? Because that fluctuates throughout the day. We can use more energy when there's more renewables on the grid and the carbon intensity is lower. We know the sun angle, we know the wind speed, we know all these variables, right? We're going to save buildings 25% on their energy costs or on their HVAC costs, and we're going to cut their overall carbon emissions by 40%. That got really commercialized 5 years ago. Today, it's in over 15,000 buildings around the world, and the company was just acquired by Train Technologies, right? So, like, we had a VP for a real estate development company in New York reach out and was like, this is cool. And was literally this: I am going to bring this to my boss. I appreciate that this is de-risked. It was like kind of the verbatim. We were like, that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish. And so we do get that feedback regularly from kind of, I would say, director level and up decision makers who are trying to figure out what's out there today that works for their business, right? That really works for their business. And so it's those types of solutions we get very excited about.
What else are you seeing working out there? What's kind of a few bullet points or a handful of technologies that have been cool, just like BrainBox AI?
One of the companies that I've just found remarkable is a company called Zoom, Z-U-M. And this was started by a woman, Ritu Narayan, out in Silicon Valley, who looked at student transportation, basically the school bus. And she comes on the show and she says, Josh, do your kids take the school bus? And I was like, well, I wish they'd take a little more than they do. But effectively, okay, yeah, let's say they take the school bus. She's like, okay, well, they're having the same experience that your grandparents had, because school buses haven't changed in 80 years, even though everything else has changed. Same tech, same situation where the school administrators have no idea where the bus is once it's left the parking lot. Parents have no idea where the bus is, and for most major school districts in America, kids are chronically late to school. Like, it is this insane situation, and so Zoom has developed this whole suite of technologies. I mean, it's really like a vertically integrated solution for school buses. So they went to the city of Oakland and they said, look, we're going to do a number of things here. We're going to make these school bus routes far more efficient. One, you're going to know where the school bus is. Parents are going to know where the school bus is. We're going to use AI to start to optimize these school bus routes. And also, if someone's not going to school, maybe the kid's sick, a parent can go on the app and say, kid's not going to school, the bus reroutes. Doesn't have to go there and wait, right? We're going to do all these efficient things. And then they said, okay, look, you guys have about 140 school buses that you in your fleet. We're running your system with 72. You have all of the stuff you don't need. And now we're going to electrify your school system, but we only need 72 buses. We actually don't need to, right? So you have this combination of AI creating this massive efficiency gain that then enables electrification in a far more cost-effective way. And so Zoom went also in the last probably, again, 4 or 5 years from working with Oakland to working with LA, San Francisco, Kansas City, Nashville, Boston. They're in over 4,000 schools, most of the big school districts around America, because it's just a better experience for everyone, from the kids to the parents to the school administrators, and the environment benefits too.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really interesting. You had mentioned before we were chatting that there's this infrastructure layer that's actually powering a lot of this, right? We're seeing stuff with, you had mentioned AI a few times, both with BrainBox AI as well as with Zoom. There is this sort of efficiency layer of taking compute and being able to, take sensors, where the school buses are in this example, 74 to, 100 and something that you have this kind of decrease. If we go one level deeper, what is happening in the infrastructure? How is AI helping? Is there stuff with rare earths, with materials? There's a lot of stuff with the tariffs that are obviously important to discuss kind of this year. What's happening there? What's happening on the ground level?
What's really interesting is that when we think about a clean energy transition, we think, well, we need more solar, we need more wind, we need more batteries, and we're at that level, right? But then, yeah, when you go a step deeper and you think, okay, what enables that other than, like, say, policy or customer interest or low cost? Like, what technologically enables that? The world's wrestling today, and it's increasingly in the news, wrestling with rare earth minerals, this thing that we don't really know a lot about, but we hear Trump saying, oh, the rare earths, and we're like, well, okay, I guess we need the rare earths, but what is that? And is that lithium? Well, no, lithium you do need as a mineral for the clean energy transition, of course, but those aren't the rare earths. The rare earths, I wouldn't be able to say them. They're like they're at the bottom of the oh gosh, now I'm going to forget.
Periodic table.
Thank you. Yes, at the bottom of the periodic table, right?
So it's like the Californium and like Einsteinium or something. There's like
It rhymes with all those things, right? Yeah, and so this gives you also a level of like how deep we go into the tech. We're trying to like be like, okay, got it. There's a tech, but let's talk about the business case here. So these rare earth minerals become rare earth magnets, and these rare earth magnets is what enables a electric car to have a powerful motor, and you want as efficient a motor as possible. That's rare earth magnets that are actually running that motor. It's rare earth magnets in massive, massive wind turbines. Okay, so this is important for the clean energy transition. It's also rare earth magnets in hard disk drives in data centers. It's also, right, they're also in MRIs or MRI machines. So they're kind of critical to civilization. And China has 90% of the supply chain, right? So that's something that we're now waking up to. And good on China. 2 decades ago, they had the foresight to see we're moving toward an electrified world. Let's go kind of build relationships strategically with the mines, and let's set up all the manufacturing infrastructure we need, of course, in China to do that. This company, Cyclic Materials, who we brought on the show, recently went through a Series B round that actually was extended to bring in Amazon. Microsoft is already an investor, BMW, Jaguar, because Cyclic Materials is the only company in the world that's figured out how to recycle rare earth magnets inside of these motors at the end of life of these products. People said it couldn't be done. They figured out how to do it. And because these rare earth magnets, when say a electric motor is being recycled, and a lot of them actually are increasingly being recycled, the magnets, because they're magnetic, they adhere to steel. The steel gets recycled, but it's very hard to separate the magnets actually, right? And so they just kind of go into the slag and they're gone forever. So we're moving to this world where there's now what would be considered more urban mining, right? It's like, okay, China makes the stuff, but we have all the stuff, right? And at the end of now, so now there's this understanding of like, okay, we've got to go mine for these, these materials kind of post end of life. Those waste streams exist, but a company like Cyclic Materials kind of taps into that. Last year, they shipped a ton of these like pure rare earths, and they're actually purer than what you get from China because they've already been kind of distilled and all the impurities been right. So that's why you have all of the many of the biggest companies in the world saying, yeah, this is going to be, we need to be part of this. And so you start to gain this understanding of, wow, I had no idea that these rare earth magnets were so essential to the future, and now there's a way to do it. And you see this type of urban mining happening in Taiwan, which is fascinating because when you're in an island economy and you don't have a lot of raw materials, it's kind of like invention is the mother of necessity. This is going to be a big piece of the future.
This is such a cool through line, Josh. I feel like when we started this episode, you started off with this quote that you've worked in sustainability, media, and startups from the beginning. You have this kind of view on design and products, and then you came from the sustainable furniture company to building Planted. And I particularly love this example of like you want a material when the construction worker is out there, they shouldn't feel the difference when they're putting a nail in the planted material versus in plywood. Because if you make it more difficult, right, then the nails won't go in. There'll be other issues. Like just this sort of product should be better, and they should be easily replaced with what they're substituting. With everything you're doing at Supercool now and the technologies you mentioned, I want to kind of inverse the thinking. And is there a problem that you're seeing right now that there is a solution off of everything you've kind of surveyed in the portfolio and what's in Supercool that maybe has fizzled out, or there's some sort of like validation on a particular technology that needs to get brought back to life, or like somebody is almost there and we're going to like it's going to be the Planted for the building industry that's going to have the same hit that a construction worker. Like what is that next thing? What do you think it is?
So as you're talking, maybe I'll say two things because I'm going to try and think of what I think that next thing is. But it does remind me of, very often that next thing is it's as much about the technology and the team. And as we know from startups, and this is all, very like well-trodden wisdom, but like it's as much about timing, right, as anything else. I'm reminded just as you're asking that question, Ravi, of this company called Aeroseal that we talked to, because Aeroseal had a technology that was invented in the 1990s. We come back to buildings and to HVAC systems, or even just building envelopes, right? They're very leaky. HVAC systems, it's estimated that even half the energy, half the heating and cooling is lost from, if you have old ducts, from leaks, whether it's in your home or in, the Wynn Hotel in Vegas. This guy who was an academic invented this tech that it would create like negative pressure around the ducts, and then he would inject this particle cloud that would kind of move through the ducts, find the leaks, and kind of adhere to the leaks permanently. Now, that it sounds simple, but you have to kind of make it work for different humidities, all different types of conditions, and it has to be permanent. So he invented it. He couldn't commercialize it. Carrier acquired it right around the year 2000. And then, for a whole host of reasons, it just languished in Carrier for a decade. They didn't commercialize it. This guy, Amit Gupta, comes along. He's just a rising product manager, gets put into his portfolio, and he looks at this thing, and his eyes just light up. He goes, "Oh my God, this is unbelievable. I've got all these relatives in the UK basically living in the leakiest houses in like the modern world, right? It's like, this is going to do so much good." And so ultimately he leaves Carrier, and somehow he negotiates to take this technology with him. It takes him a decade, right? But then he starts to figure it out. And then Breakthrough Energy Ventures comes in, Bill Gates, and they invest, and then others invest. And now 30 years later, that technology is actually scaling up. It's done the Wynn Hotel. It's done the, what's the building right above the tower, right above Grand Central Station, the MetLife building. It's done these it does like every building in Dubai, of course. And now it's for homes as well, right? It can be retrofitted. It's hard. I guess what I'd say, it's hard for me to know what is going to be the next planted that's kind of off, because sometimes it's only in hindsight that you can look back and be like, wow, it took 30 years, right, for this thing to become an overnight success with the right entrepreneur to steward it and the timing where the world was ready for it.
Really interesting. I love that. I'm gonna have to look up. Would you say it was Aeroseal?
Aeroseal, yeah. Yeah.
Josh, I asked everybody this question before we exit, and it's: do you have a book, a TV show, or a movie that has had a profound impact on the way that you see the world?
All right. Well, what jumps to mind is The Matrix. I saw it when it came out in 1999. I'm living in Paris. I was getting my MBA. I was working for Delphi Auto Systems. It was like AC Delco spark plugs, like the parts supplier to General Motors. They just spun out. And I was really having this, I think I was 28 or 29. I'm having like this existential sort of crisis moment of like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I was alone in Paris. No, it's not a terrible thing to be alone in Paris, but I was really alone, just working for this company. And I was a little bit lost and searching for meaning for me, kind of meaning of life, trying to understand the world that we live in. And I was getting this international MBA from a school called Thunderbird. I go see that movie, and I remember coming out of the theater, like stepping into the broad daylight and like actually saying out loud, like, that's exactly what's happening. And so I think just this like drive to, in my own kind of channel, thinking about sustainability or, kind of raising consciousness, kind of seeing the world, like kind of what is really happening. That always stayed with me. And it means a lot to me, and I feel like I'm a very tolerant person. The one area where I don't have a lot of tolerance is for provincial thinking, closed-mindedness. I have a very, very difficult time with that, and I think The Matrix really even kind of enhanced that more. It's like kind of this desire to see what's really going on.
Love that. Matrix. Awesome. Josh, thank you so much for coming on Liquid Assets. This was an extremely insightful conversation.
Ravi, well, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun, and I appreciate the questions, opportunity to reflect on some of this stuff.
Thanks, and we'll hopefully see you in New York next week.
Sounds great.